is Cup of Go for April 24th, 2023. Keep up to date with the important happenings in the Go community in just 15 minutes per week. I'm your co-host, Jonathan Hall.
And I'm your co-host, Shai Ahmad. What's up, Jonathan? Everything okay with you and your equipment?
No, it's not. I'm a Linux user, and this morning I came into my office to discover my computer was not powered on, and it's usually on all the time. So I powered it on, and it won't boot. My encrypted disks are possibly corrupted. So when we're done recording, I'm going to go try to debug that. And hopefully I won't be reinstalling my entire operating system.
Well, I guess the song was right. These boots were made for walking all over you.
That's right.
Well, at least you fulfilled the obligatory, how do you know someone's a Linux user? Don't worry, they'll tell them,
Yeah, exactly.
They'll tell you. So you covered 400 listeners in one episode. All right, we have a ton of stuff to get into today and an interesting interview after the break. So let's get started with this week's news. What's urgent, Jonathan?
Well,
what do I need to know right now?
Yeah, right now you need to know that you need to send your call for paper proposal to GopherCon Brazil. I know you're going to be in Brazil September 22nd and 23rd and would love to be presenting at GopherCon Brazil. Or if maybe it's not you, Shai, maybe someone else listening describes them, they should definitely present their call for paper.
So we have call for paper for GopherCon Brazil. Like always, when we mention a call for papers, if you're on the fence, you have something to talk about, but you're not sure it's good enough, good enough. Hand it in. Definitely. There's nothing you could lose. There's also a call for papers for GoLab 2023, right?
That one's until May 21st, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And the GopherCon Brazil CFP is until May 3rd.
Yeah, and GoLab is in Italy. So if Brazil is less your thing, you're more European, then Florence, Italy, November 19th to November 21. What else is going on?
So I think that covers it for conferences, but we have a ton happening with the development of Go, which will become 1.21. We have a lot to talk about with regard to some updates there, some proposals that have been proposed and are getting some good discussion. I think the first one is probably about the IOFS proposal to add a writable interface. Many of you will recall that in Go 1.16, they added the FS package with sort of a file system wrapper to read things. And that's standard now. That's what enabled the embed capability in Go 1.16. And it's been incorporated into HTTP wrappers and a whole bunch of different things. They're talking about extending that, and they have been for quite some time, extending that to be writable as well. And this last week, this issue's been open for a couple of years, since before 1.16 came out, I believe. But this last week, Russ Cox asked if anybody has examples in the wild of people using their own implementation of an abstract file system writer interface. They would love to have that added to the issue so that they can compare that and see if this is actually something to add to the standard library. There's been a lot of discussion on it, some back and forth, a lot of bike shedding, but some useful information, useful discussion as well. But I wanted to really point this out because if you have a project at your work or on an open source project anywhere that uses a writable abstraction interface, this would be a great time to go add that to that issue so that the Go community can consider your use case when they're trying to design this interface and decide, in fact, whether or not to include it in the standard library.
In one of the GopherCons I was at, Liri Sokol, who's a great open source developer who's doing a lot of work around Go, used this new interface to create a totally version controlled file system. Like you can go to folders and it goes to versions and you can move forward and backward in time and stuff like that. So I'll reach out to her to point it out in the discussion. But it looks like a super lively discussion. Tons of comments. 137 comments. Damn.
I'm subscribed to this one just because it interests me so much, and my mobile phone is kind of exploding with these messages throughout the day.
Yeah, maybe that's why your hard drive crashed.
Maybe.
Sorry, I'm not trying to bring it up again and again. It's just so funny. Other stuff in Go 121, One thing we talked about in the past, so I'll just briefly mention, loopvar, which we all know and hate. Briefly, when you have a for loop and it goes over, basically the most normal use case, or I guess the most prevalent use case I'm talking about, is when you want to loop over a range of items, and then or range of anything, and then you want to append the pointer to that item. It has a problem, and the variable is per loop, not per iteration. So what you have in the line that says for item, you have to redefine it, which leads to this really annoying item walrus operator item, which is a very annoying gotcha in a lot of Go code that you just sort of have to learn and then remember it, and then groan every time you have to fix it. Fixing it, is a breaking change, so you can't really do it without a major version, right? You won't do it in a patch. No one would do that, right, Jonathan?
No, of course not.
Foreshadowing.
Yes.
But the team has been working on a flag for the compiler called Go Experiment equals loopvar. That proposal has been accepted, and I would bet that it's already going into 121. Which
in fact, it has been merged. So yes, it's definitely going into 121.
Yeah, I hope it won't cause any weird breaking changes when they test out 121, because it's complicated to change something that fundamental.
Yep.
But yeah, so hopefully starting 121, you could do Go Experiment equals loopvar in your compile flags and move all that weird code. And I assume a few months after that, there's already going to be a linter that's going to be like a loopvar linter in Golang CI lint, which points out all the places that still use this weird structure, and will suggest for you to fix it.
Yep.
So if you're looking forward to 121, this is one of the things you have to have in your to-do list once you upgrade 121. Talking about breaking changes, I don't know if this is the nicest way to introduce this news item. Find the nicer way, Jonathan.
Okay, so we've talked about this project before. Gitea, Gitea, lets you host your own sort of Git server, and they have a new release out, version 1.19.1. The odd thing is that it's the top of the release file mentions it's a breaking change. I think it's a pretty minor breaking change, but so strictly speaking, it's not following Semver, whatever. It has a little bit.
Yeah, we're just poking some fun at you, Gitea, because we're a coffee-based, news program.
If they were calling it Git Coffee, we wouldn't have any problem with them violating Semver all day long. But anyway, it's worth checking out. There's a bunch of enhancements, which I'm not going to go into all the details. But if you are a user of this project, you probably want to update. But beware of the breaking change. Basically, actions have been renamed to repo.actions. I don't actually know how that affects anything. But
I guess it would break your code the moment you upgrade. So
probably, yeah.
Worth doing that on purpose. It does come with a bunch of enhancements, bunch of bug fixes, and even some translations, which is really, really cool. Something else we talked about in the past is slog, structured logging, which has gotten a lot of people are interested. A lot of people are contributing. There are two things that were accepted, and we specifically want to highlight adding vet checks for variadic inputs. Let's start with what this vet check does.
Well,
John.
There's a funny API in the slog proposal. I shouldn't say proposal. It's actively being developed, and it's going to be in part of 121. But you can, if you've used any structured logging library, you probably are accustomed to the idea of adding key value pairs to your logs. And there's different libraries that do this different
when
ways.
It goes into the final log line, it's key value in the output JSON, which then gets translated into facets or measures in your Datadog or whatever ground cover.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if you use Logres, it uses a literal map of string to empty interface, so you can do that. That's pretty standard. But other libraries, I think Zap, and there's a few others, they basically use a variadic argument, and they expect an even number of arguments, and so every odd numbered one is the key, and every even numbered one is the value. But this leads to problems, and so slog has taken a similar approach. It's actually more complicated than that. But it basically, you can pass in either key value pairs as two of the variadic arguments, or a sort of wrapped value that contains both a key and a value. But this, in either version of that, you have this potential problem that what if you forget the key or the value, or you accidentally put an odd numbered number of arguments? You end up with this weird thing that, is this a key or is it a value? Well, slog has a definitive answer to that, and that is if you get an odd numbered thing, it becomes a value with a key of exclamation bad key, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
But the vet check helps to ensure that you have the right number of values in your variadic inputs.
At the right number and the right type, because you can't use, for example, int as a string value to the key.
Right.
The key has to be a string.
Right.
This proposal has been accepted and it's actively being developed. One of the interesting things about it is I think it's good, but a lot of people don't like the API because they, like you like to phrase it, it's a foot gun, right?
Yeah.
The variadic input, it's comfortable, it's easy to use. But I wouldn't call it ergonomic. It's not super healthy. So I think it's probably the shortest code you could get, which is important for logs, which you have all over your code, but they're usually not part of the business logic. One of the things we discussed was this proposal in our Slack channel, which is a good place to shout it out. Joe Davidson, if you remember, he's the person behind XC, which is a markdown task runner, which we've discussed on the show in the past, started a discussion about this API, whether we like it, whether we don't like it, and how it's similar to Zap, which is another logging library. And Akshay Shah, who actually wrote Zap, gave his opinion on it, where he said he bike shedded this issue forever. And just ended up taking the var args API from log15, since in Uber, they ran a centrally managed set of linters and vet checks, and it was good enough. You have enough tooling to allow yourself to use this sort of unsafe API.
Mm-hmm.
And with this vet check, I think everybody can start enjoying that level of tooling and development around logging, which is important.
Yes. I'm glad it's part of the official GoVet rather than a third-party linter, because that makes it more likely to be used frequently.
Yes.
And last for today, let's talk about the proposal to add the context.merge function. I think we talked about this maybe a month or two ago. The idea was to be able to take two contexts and merge them together. And the proposal has been declined, although not necessarily forever. It's essentially on hold. If you'll recall something else we've talked about in the past, that's the context.afterfunc that we thought might make more sense to be called do or on done or whatever. But the idea for context.merge is to wait until after that has been running in the wild for a while and get some feedback on this afterfunc and see if that either solves the problem of merging context or at least changes the nature of it enough that this proposal might be resurfaced, but in a different form. So they didn't feel like it made sense to do both of these roughly at the same time because they kind of have an overlap and they might interact with each other in odd ways.
I think that context doesn't get enough love from, Go by example or, all these intros to Go. They make the language look very simple, and the language really does not have a lot of keywords and a lot of structures that you need to learn, but you have to learn context. and making it more complex with merging, afterfunc, ondone, and whatever. I think it's good that the team is doing it very carefully and not just pushing a ton of features into this already sort of busy and often misused structure.
I appreciate the how difficult it is to make changes to the standard library, and to the main language. Because I've worked with some other languages that just sort of adopt every new feature they come across, and then they have to backtrack, and that's always hard and painful.
And also makes it just harder to understand and learn the language. You have a bunch of ways to do everything. All right, so this wraps it up for the news this week. We have a bunch of stuff we wanted to talk about, but we want to stay within the time span. So we'll keep it on the back burner for next week. Thanks for listening. After the ad break, we're going to have a super interesting interview with Fraser and Callum from GoTech. Something a bit different this time. They are a recruitment agency. So we're going to talk about the market and job interviews and stuff like that. So if that interests you, stick around after the ad break.
Great. Talk to you in a few minutes.
Hi, welcome to our ad break. This is a good place to take a breather before the interview. And if you want to reach out to us about what we mentioned in the show, you can find us on cupogo.dev. That's our site. You can also talk to us in the Gopher Slack, #cupogo, that's kebab case with hyphens, or even email us at news@cupogo.dev. That is news@cupogo.dev. A few updates. So we're back on schedule. And one of the things we posted last week, or maybe the week before that, was a survey about swag. Looks like the people want it. So we're going to post a link this week to where you can buy your Cupogo cups.
Yay.
You're only permitted to put coffee in them. We will put sensors in the cups to measure if you're using it for anything else.
And you're only allowed to code in Go while you're drinking from the cup, too. If you try to use Python or Rust, the cup will explode.
Yeah, it's sort of a Mission Impossible thing with, the self-destroying messages. So in the same way that your code base is going to explode if you use language that's not Go. I've been interviewing right now, and it's really hard our entire backend is in Python. Oh, no. Okay. We love other languages, just a bit less. If you like the show, please leave a review on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And also share it with your co-workers, co-students, or just Gophers in your area. It really helps out. And stick around after this brief musical intermission for our interview with Fraser and Callum from GoTech.
Looking forward to it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back from the ad break. We're very excited to host Fraser and Callum from GoTech here. Hi, guys.
Nice to meet you.
Nice. How are you?
I'm doing well. As you know, from the last 25 minutes, we've been waiting for Jonathan. And I'm editing the show today, so I'll be able to keep it in, Jonathan.
All right.
I'm sorry. All right. So if our listeners remember, a few months ago, I was speaking at GopherCon Israel. And one of the people I met, in the in the food lines, waiting for the beer after the talks, was Fraser. We got to know each other, and Fraser told me about GoTech, and here we are. So let's start, guys, with you introducing yourselves. What's your deal, and what's GoTech deal?
Cool. No, thanks for inviting us onto the show, Jonathan. And Shay, obviously, very much appreciate that. But look, just to give you and the listeners, obviously, a quick overview of us. We are GoTech. We specialise in the placement of Golang professionals, across Europe. Well, not just Europe, the world. My name's Callum Williams. I'm the director here.
And Fraser Williams as well. Actually, brothers as well.
No way.
Yeah. We don't look the same, but yeah.
So this is an audio show, so this is not gonna carry through.
Oh, that's right then.
But at the risk of being a bit, a bit stereotypical, Fraser on the left sort of looks like I would say the business version of Ron Weasley. very orangey kind of person. And Callum just looks like a straight football coach. And definitely not similar at all. But all right, that's a nice surprise.
Yeah, we do
family business.
Yeah,
that's it. I think I was in the recruitment industry a little bit before Fraser, and then he decided that he wanted to jump on board when we started GoTech. So
he saw your success and decided it was time to join, basically.
Pretty much. It's actually come from a plumbing background, and then an unfortunate injury, and Callum thankfully started a business. So come and 3 years later, still been within the market. So it's going well.
Yeah, here we are.
That's awesome. Before we started the recording, I asked you how many people you've placed, how many roles you've filled, and it's over 100. So this is not like some I'll hook up some of my friends kind of thing. This is a real business.
Yeah.
Our listeners are mostly Go developers, and the people we interviewed so far were mostly Go developers. And Jonathan and I thought it would be super interesting to ask you all some questions about the hiring landscape right now, what's going on with the market. We all know that it's not great. So I think at least my first question was, what could give someone an edge? You have a list of papers on your desk, right? Who's number one and why?
Yeah. Well, look, I suppose apart from the very obvious kind of points around, years you worked with Go, what sort of companies you've worked for, what industries, etc. I think one of the biggest things that I'm personally seeing at the minute with my clients is someone being a cultural fit, as well as obviously fitting the job description on a technical basis as well. More often now are we seeing people, actually fail interview processes because they don't necessarily fit or are not coming across on the interview process that they would be a good cultural fit within the business. Whether that be, people not, kind of coming across enthusiastic, or they're involved within the Go community, etc. on the interview process. But it just seems like more and more companies nowadays are, classing this cultural exercise, or they do within the interview process, as a very important stage too. So I'd want to stress that to obviously, the listeners, that would be, something to very much, kind of think about when interviewing too.
How would you practice that? How would you recommend, let's say I'm coming to GoTech and I'm like, oh my God, I have 20 rejections. They all say I'm not a culture fit. Other than the fact, I described Fraser, I described you. I basically look like a cleaned up version of Bin Laden. Other than the fact that that's how I look, how would you help me, practice my culture fit?
Look, it's a very good question, I suppose, and sometimes it just comes down to people's personalities, etc. Right, but maybe taking a think about. It's a very good question. In all honesty,
things such as obviously your research behind the business before you even go into that process to begin with, as such, what you know about the business, why you want to work for that business. They're going to give you pointers yourself as to sort of what the culture is going to be like within that company, and you're going to be able to base that yourself with you thinking. I mean, at the same time, you're going to be interviewing that company as well, so you want to make sure that culture is right for your personality type. A culture fit is realistically a personality test as such, so you might be fit the bill for one company and not the other one, based on culture and based on who is already working within that business.
So one thing I've been feeling, I'm looking for a job right now as well, is that looking up your hiring manager and looking up who's going to interview you on LinkedIn, even just, it doesn't have to be a super creepy, you have to set up binoculars outside their window kind of thing. Just research them in LinkedIn 15, 20 minutes before the interview, know what companies they worked for, know what kind of experience you're going into. that could give an edge as well. People like it when you know them; they're flattered.
Yeah, for sure. Just to add on that, Shay, if you are working with a recruiter who's not, giving you those details, then you shouldn't be working with them.
Yeah, I'm currently going solo, but I might.
So I'm curious. I hear a lot of from juniors who are trying to get a Go job. I'm curious what you've seen with regard to that, and especially now with the way that the market is kind of on its head right now. But in both in general and specifically in the last few months, do you see many placements for entry-level Go developers? Maybe they have experience in Python or Java or something, and they want to switch to Go, or maybe they're completely fresh out of university. What do you see in that regard?
Yeah. I would say that there's a fair few, obviously, junior entry-level jobs out there. A lot of people, a lot of companies will be not expecting much Go experience. They want people coming from maybe, let's say, a Python background or whatever, and maybe they could be a senior within that, and then maybe filling into like a mid-level role filling into a junior role because they've not got that professional or commercial Golang experience there. So they're going to be taking people from different backgrounds. There's a lot of companies that are obviously turning towards Golang now, in which there is opening up a lot more entry-level jobs on that front.
Yeah. And one thing I would add on that, we're quite lucky, I'd say, within the junior kind of Go community in the UK. There are 3 or 4 businesses that I can personally think of off the top of my head that actually have Golang kind of workshops or Golang training schemes within the business. So you'll come in as a junior developer and be given training around Golang from your very first day. So I'm not sure if there's other businesses out there that kind of do similar things to that.
So I'm curious if you can offer any advice to people who are new to Go. Maybe they've been playing with it as a hobby project, or they're interested in learning. They're interested in getting a job, their first job as a Go developer. Other than reaching out to you, obviously, if they're in the areas you work, what general approaches can be taken? How do you get noticed? Because there's a sea of people looking for these jobs. How do you stand out?
Yeah. I would say 2 big things, really. Obviously, being involved in the sort of the open source communities and things like that, adding to different GitHub repos, that sort of stuff. But biggest thing I would say is probably being involved in the community in terms of attending meetups and things like that. So we're lucky here in London. We've got the London Gophers, which is one of the biggest Golang meetups that happens once a month, in which there is all sorts of people in attendance there. Obviously, myself, I've been to multiple different ones. There's different recruiters there, but not only recruiters, you're going to be speaking with potential hiring managers who are obviously working within the businesses themselves that are needing junior devs and things like that. So just getting your face out there, meeting new people, and all those sorts of things, just being involved in that community there is going to be, I'd say, the biggest standout point in getting your name out there and helping yourself.
And to flip that question on its head, let's say I'm a hiring manager, or let's say I'm you guys, right? And I'm getting someone, he's enthusiastic, wants to be a junior dev. How do you filter out people who you think could do it? I think everyone can do it, but some people are a better fit than others in day one. How do you, I don't know, I don't want to really say filter, but how do you rank, people who knock on your door in terms of potential?
Yeah. So we always kind of try and work backwards, as we say, right? So we would obviously firstly be taking, when a CV comes across our desk, what kind of training has this person done? Where did they study? What companies have they already worked for? Who are they rubbing shoulders with on a regular basis? Not just their peers or their engineer managers, their senior principal staff level engineers that they may have worked with in the past too. So I'd say, working backwards, when looking at the CV is always our first kind of point of call.
And I guess that you're looking at a ton of CVs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is it better to have a differentiated one or one that's very easy to parse?
I mean, short and sweet is normally the way forward. Obviously, people with they're sending over a 10-page CV. If you're putting that in front of a hiring manager or something like that, then they're not going to be taking into account half of the stuff in there. They want to see the important things, obviously, where you've been working with GoLang, the types of projects you've worked on, what other tools you've used alongside that. And if it's short, sweet, straight to the point, and in a standout manner, then I feel like just on a visual basis, then that's going to catch the eye of a hiring manager to begin with. And then things like we said, such as the peers you've worked alongside, the different companies you've worked for, where you learnt your trade. And then, like I said before, on the open source side of things as well, if you're heavily involved in that sort of stuff.
All right. I think I'll send over my CV to y'all so you can vet it. That would be interesting.
Perfect.
One thing I saw around LinkedIn from someone I follow who will stay unnamed is that one thing that they can appreciate about the ridiculous level of AI hype these days is that they've forgotten about the ridiculous levels of blockchain hype that preceded it. Jonathan, did you see that post?
I did see that. Yeah, it looks like it's been getting a lot of traction.
Jonathan is complaining on LinkedIn. Which at least is nicer because it keeps the whole, the amazing post. Today, I walked to the office and I saw that at least keeps these posts away. But, to turn that complaining into a question, what verticals are big right now? I assume that when you opened GoTech, many Go devs were aimed toward companies who do Web3 and crypto. Is this something that you've been seeing lessen over the last few months? What verticals are rising? What sort of business vertical do I need to know if I want to get a job right now?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I don't think the hype around Web3, crypto, blockchain has gone away at all. In all honesty, some of the bigger customers that we're working with right now in terms of live vacancies are all very much within that vertical. So I personally don't think that hype has gone away at all.
And there are a lot of Go roles in Web3, right?
Yes, a lot. And the brilliant thing with these companies that we're working with, they're all very much on a remote basis or 100% remote companies, right? So let's say the company's based in Finland. There's even you're able to place people from America, Australia, you name it. If these people are happy to kind of work the crossover in terms of working hours, the market is wide open as to where you can place these people from.
And other than Web3, what are the big businesses or business types, I guess I would say?
Yeah, I'd say the gaming and fintech side are probably up there with the most. I mean, the gaming side is obviously the reason people use GoLang. Obviously, like we said before, we're not the most technical people in the world, but from the conversations we have, the speed of GoLang, the ease of use, those sorts of things, the gaming companies are all over that. And well, the way that market is probably not going anywhere for a long time, is there's quite a lot of vacancies within that side of things as well. So,
well, that's great. There are a lot of vacancies, but just in all honesty, are there fewer open roles than there were, a year ago?
Yes.
Has the market actually cooled down, or is it just looks bad?
No, the market has cooled down. There's certainly fewer vacancies, and there's certainly more people on the market who are looking for, a new role, a new job. Obviously, when the big companies were making cuts, obviously fills the market with a lot of, extra people looking for jobs who wouldn't necessarily be, or weren't necessarily planning on having to look for a new role. But to answer your question, yes, that the market has certainly cooled down. But I would say the last kind of 2 weeks or so, certainly since the new financial year, here in the UK, there has been an increase in kind of vacancies being posted across job boards, LinkedIn, the Slack channels, etc. too. Again, so hopefully we're at the back end of that, and we're now starting to see the increase that we're all hoping for.
Mm-hmm. Excuse my ignorance. A new financial year? I know that there's a Chinese year and a Gregorian year.
Yeah, so the financial year in the UK runs from April till March. So we're now in financial year 2023 to 2024.
Okay.
So hiring managers will be given, new budgets.
I get that.
And recruit, and obviously once they have, access to that new budget, the first thing many hiring managers think of is, okay, who can I hire? What can I spend with agencies, etc. So yeah.
Do you work mostly in the UK? I think you mentioned Europe and around the world, but look, just give me a sense for which of our listeners should contact you if they're looking for work right now.
Yeah. If they're based anywhere in the world, they should contact us.
Okay.
Obviously, look, we're based in the UK. Our general office hours are 8 until 5 p.m. It doesn't mean we're not working after 5 p.m. All of our customers are based, kind of globally. We've got customers on the east coast of America, all across the Nordics, Germany, Austria. Even as far as Singapore, we've had customers on that side of the world. So to answer your question, anyone looking for a role in Go should contact us, because I'm sure we'll have something.
And
That makes it simple,
we'll
then.
post the contact information in the show notes for y'all.
Yes, of course.
Sure. Brilliant.
Yep.
So what you're saying is that Martians are not welcome if you're based in the world.
We can give them a try, not too sure how they'll invoice and get paid, but
They may not fit on a cultural basis.
One thing I sent, Jonathan, I think I sent you that link, but we talked about the fiscal year. There's obviously a lot of bugs with time zones, setting up times, daylight saving time, and whatever. Now with humanity setting up bases on the moon and Mars, there are standards for moon time and Mars time, and how you sync it up to Earth time. Even how do you know how to set up a meeting?
It's a very good question.
I hope it will be relevant in our lifetimes. I don't know. I'm optimistic about that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Other than people contacting you and you finding people through meetups, where else do you source candidates?
Well, the obvious and biggest one for us is LinkedIn. We like to have as big of a presence on LinkedIn as possible. We get a certain amount of in-mails every month, which I'm sure a lot of the listeners will have received an in-mail from us at some point. But there's also a very good Slack community, Slack channel that we're heavily a part of as well. All of the live vacancies that we have, as soon as we get that live vacancy, we're posting it in the Slack channel for people to see too.
I would also say that sort of referrals would be a massive one. Let's say you've placed a great engineer at a company, you've got that relationship with that person there. You can trust that person. People they're going to be putting across to represent by themselves. It's going to be a trusted referral. So 9 times out of 10, if a candidate you've placed, they're referring somebody they've worked with or their friend for that matter, they're normally pretty up there with a good standard. So it's a good method that way.
Sure.
Well, once you've placed someone, how do you gauge? How do you and the client gauge good fit? And I guess what I'm trying to get at is what kind of track record do you have with placing candidates, and how does that work over the long term? And, it's relatively easy, I think, to place a random candidate, but are they a good fit? And of course, your customers come back to you again and again if you give them good fits. How do you gauge that?
Yeah, of course. So what you'd be referring to maybe is what we have in the recruitment industry for us is like a rebate period, right? So once we place someone within a role, it's generally within the first 3 months that if things didn't work out, then obviously there would be a part of or the whole of the recruitment fee to kind of place back. But our kind of placement to leaving record is very good. A lot of our customers have very rigorous or vigorous interview processes. So very rarely do you get someone who, once they're placed into a role, will leave within, the first 3 months or so because of the interview process that most of our customers have in place.
We would always look to stay in contact with the candidate that we've placed for that initial period of them joining as well. Obviously, keeping in touch, making sure they're happy, any concerns that have come up and things like that. If somebody's starting to wobble or they're not exactly enjoying that position they've been put into, we obviously have a good relationship with the client and things like that, so we can help them out, maybe finding different areas within that same business. At the end of the day, they've joined that business for that business, so they like the product or whatever it is as a whole that they've joined for that reason. But let's say the team they go in, nobody knows what it's going to be like to work within a company until you're actually working within there. You can do all your background research and everything like that, but until you're actually within that business, you're not going to get the real idea of what it's like. So then you can help them move to different areas of the business, different teams and things like that. So we'll always look to stay in contact and just make sure everything's all on track.
Wow, that's brilliant. End to end.
I think it would be good to shout out your website. And of course, we'll put the contact details in the show notes too. But for anybody who's driving, we don't want them checking that while they're driving. How can they find you?
Yeah. So for anyone who's listening, please check us out on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's where we've got the biggest presence, and you'll be able to find both ourselves and anyone else who works at GoTech. So that's GoTech Recruit, or just Go Space Tech on LinkedIn. We're a bit cool, so we spelt the tech TEK. Check us out on there, and obviously send us a connection request, and we'll be more than happy to speak.
Nice.
All right. Usually we end the interviews with what's your favorite feature of Go, but seeing that you mostly work with Go developers, what's your favorite feature of Go developers? What's great about these people?
I think the community as a whole, and the way it's such a close, tight-knit community of developers. You see obviously the other communities out there, such as obviously the Java, JavaScript, things like that, they're huge. Go is obviously a bit more tight-knit, closer together. People speak, everyone knows each other. So it's a good way to, once you've met one person, that opens the door to a whole host of other people within that community as well. So yeah, just the fact that it's so close-knit and friendly, and where there's so many different meetups and things like that, you're able to get out and meet a lot of people. So for us as recruiters, that community is probably the best sense of Golang for us.
Good answer.
Well, we met in a meetup in a
Exactly.
So I guess that shows it.
So, and here we are now, a couple of months down the line, talking on your podcast. So it's obviously, that's one of the best things about it, I'd say.
And we have to ask it as well. What's the worst thing about Go developers? What's your least favorite feature of these people?
Ooh. You don't want to be too harsh.
You don't have to name names.
There needs to be more of them.
I get what you're saying. They don't look good enough to reproduce.
We're not saying that.
Not saying that, no. But just more people need to turn towards Golang for everyone's benefit, for the companies out there and for us as recruiters.
Well, that's great. Fraser, Callum, thanks a lot for being on our show. Again, if you want to reach out to Fraser and Callum, do it via LinkedIn, Go Tech Recruit, TEK. I met Fraser and one of his other colleagues in a meetup, and they're really nice people. They're not just nice for the podcast. They're nice even when they're hungry and waiting in line for food. So one of the most compromising positions you can find a person in. So if you're looking for a job in Go, reach out to GoTech. They can probably help you out. And thanks a lot, guys.
Brilliant.
It's been great having you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Shai. Thanks, Jonathan.
All right, this will wrap it up for this week's episode of Cup of Go. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll catch you all next week.